Unholy fuck. That's right. It is a Friday night, and believe it or not, the weather's not too bad. But the most important thing is this is the first edition of Divine Madness, and the gentleman next to me right now needs no more introduction than the legendary ass kicker in the business, Robert Lasardo. How are you doing tonight, my brother?
I'm good, Reaper. Thank you for the kind words, man.
It's the truth. Absolutely the truth. You have inspired and um, influenced a lot of actors, especially myself. And many who have shown out in the comments section. You guys are unfucking real. I love you guys. Good evening. Meredith is here. Brother Mortimer, Cody, Lizzie. Good evening to you all. So I'm pretty sure you know what to do at this point. Share this out anywhere and everywhere that there is a true crime lover or a fan of history, because that is what we're here to talk about tonight. And it's going to involve Uncle Charlie. That's right. I absolutely love this photo. You know, it's he almost in that picture for some reason it just really reminds me of Jim Morrison from The Doors when he had his big bushy beard, you know. But it's also it's like a very striking photo. You can feel his energy, you know.
Well, check this out. An interesting fun fact, and maybe intriguing fun fact, is that um, Charlie Manson was friendly with Jim Morrison. I don't know if you know that.
Mm-hmm.
And then
I actually did, believe it or not.
yeah, right. So like when Jim Morrison was having his well, let's just say when he was a bit excessive with the alcohol, uh,
Oh
Manson
yeah.
was there to kind of help him out a little bit to get sober because he realized I think Charlie was concerned about him a little bit because he saw the self-destructive tendencies, and he tried to kind of, keep him, keep him within the line, so to speak. Yeah.
And everyone says, oh, he's evil, he's obscene, he's this horrible monster. Fuck off. I
Yeah.
wanted to,
Fuck off.
for real. The man is a
Yeah.
philosopher, you know, and you and I both know very, very much that he was on a different plane of existence. And that's not like, you know, drugs or anything like that. I mean, obviously there were drugs going on, but he was on a different plane spiritually. And it's like you had said to me once, you know, he gets it. He sees and knows things that people just don't. They're just not deep enough, or they don't want to look deep. And I got one of his quotes up here that I really, really love. Um, the mind is endless. You put me in a dark, solitary cell, and to you, that's the end. To me, it's the beginning. It's the universe there. There's a world in there, and I'm free. What a prolific quote. And they
Yeah.
all think this man's deranged. Oh
If he was
man.
in India, they would consider him a bodhisattva,
Mm-hmm.
because some of those guru types or people that are practicing renunciation, they would go into cells or caves and cloister themselves away from the world and just spend all day focusing on their breathing. And
Mm-hmm.
as thoughts arise, they just stare at them. And the average person, after a little bit of time, would probably go crazy. But for people that are looking to transcend the matrix or what people perceive this world to be, that expansive consciousness, and letting go in a space where you cease to be an ego, an identity, is the beginning of freedom. For some people, it's hell.
Yeah. Some people don't. I think a lot of folks build an ego for themselves, and without it, it's fear for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
They don't know how to be anything else.
yeah,
Reaper has always been Reaper. I've never needed Reaper to be who I am. I've just elevated him in a lot of ways over the years. But the fact that you took a very sacred place and put that into the film American Trash. Congratulations, by the way, on a successful screening. I think it was last week. It should be shown everywhere. I'm just going to say that, not because I'm biased, but because this film touches you on so many different levels. But the fact that it was centered around his philosophy, I think is just incredible. I'm going to go ahead and let you, kind of say why it was what struck you to make him the centerpiece of this thing.
Several things. The way he grew up, how he came up, his childhood, the fragmentation within the family structures,
Mm-hmm.
the psychological abuse, the physical abuse that he had to endure and overcome.
Especially in those times.
Yeah, and the disposable element. He was a disposable element within this notion of family. So I could relate to that. So that was a big piece of it. And I think that also, I listened to interviews over the years, not the doctorate interviews that are put out by the mainstream media. I'm talking about the more obscure interviews, where they let them just talk and they're not manipulated. When I listened, I felt that he was communicating to me directly, and I felt that finally someone saw the world in a way that I could see, and then I didn't feel judged in his observations about life, his issues he had with conventional society, and whether it was environmental issues, whether it be the law, the court systems,
Mm-hmm.
the hypocrisy of the government institutions, the way the world's run by powerful people, mostly men, and the abuse of that power. There's a lot of things he said, man, that I felt he was speaking to a wounded aspect within myself. And there wasn't too many people I felt I could talk to along these lines or about those sort of issues, because I felt most people had kind of, I don't know, either they have accepted it and didn't want to talk about it, or they weren't, too busy distracting themselves with stuff to care anymore, to question authority, to question the world we live in. And so here is a man who helped me understand myself better, and felt like he was speaking on my behalf and to me. And I also felt that the way he communicated some of these ideologies and feelings, I felt less alone in the world, and I didn't feel judged. That was the big thing with me, is no judgment with Charlie. I felt the sense of
No.
camaraderie, and this man gets it. And I thought,
Hmm.
man, I wish I could meet him and hang out with him, because I think if I communicated some of my frustrations to him about my childhood, about the world, about pollution, about the government, societal agreements that don't make any kind of sense, the way people are with each other, all this stuff, he would understand it. And not only would he understand it, I think he might feel that he would communicate to me in it, as he says, in his fingertips, not so much with words, but he would manifest a disposition of kindness and awareness and insight that he wouldn't need to say much. Because as he said,
Hmm.
you get to know me in my fingertips. What are words? There's just blah 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 blah. That's what they teach you in school. So
Yep.
I felt a deep affection for his philosophy about getting to know me in my fingertips, like meaning through his music, he communicated also themes that made sense to me. Like, for example, that song, there's one particular lyric that goes, "As long as you have love in your heart, you'll never be alone." And I thought, wow, I can, I can appreciate that lyric and what it suggests, and I've seen evidence of it in my life. So I think that it was important to me in my film to utilize the spiritual aspect of his consciousness, his creative uh, insight, and allow him um, allow him without, obviously I didn't know the man, but allow him a voice that did not speak to this Svengali uh, you know label that's been hung on him, to speak to more of an individual that may have seemed to a lot of people to be radical, dangerous,
Oh, sure.
tempestuous.
Especially the time.
Yeah, but even with all those qualities that he had, because he was, of his own admission, a criminal and had a temperament, but I didn't want to focus on those aspects of it in the film. I wanted to communicate his
Mm.
ecological philosophies, his sensitivity to what is known in certain circles as Aqua, that organization that he basically formed. He named it Aqua: air, trees, water, and animals. And so I thought it was important to communicate Charlie's ecological philosophies in my film to those who may not know, or probably don't want to know, or not even consider the possibility or the reality that he was burning up tractor equipment in the Mojave Desert with a guy named Jesus before the, quote unquote, uh, Seal Drive killings happened. He was already an environmentalist then, and it's uh, it's just something I think that was necessary to communicate in the film, so that he would be, so people who are curious and have an affection for the man, or sense that there's more to this individual than what they've been manipulated to believe. Right? I thought, yeah,
Yeah.
time for some of us to be not even courageous, just to speak our minds, and use the art form in a way that's not. Uh, I'm not trying to sell anything as much as I'm just sharing something that I feel that for those who had wondered along these lines, maybe it might inspire others to consider a different way of seeing the more, not the destructive element of him, but the creative, and the aspect of his being that was, that had something to offer to mankind, to humanity. And you say that to the most average person, they'll think you're crazy. But I'm not talking to the average person. I'm talking to people who have the insight, the courage, or the desire to know things, and reading literature or studying things, so they can come into knowledge about what may have really happened during that time in the 60s, and get to have a better understanding of who this man really was, as opposed to what they made him out to be.
Yeah. I mean, they needed a scapegoat. when
Yeah.
it comes down to it. They needed somebody that was, rough around the edges, somebody that they could say, hey, we need to bring somebody in that's responsible for all this. And just because, he was tied, to the people that, did that. I mean, who the hell gets, put away for doing nothing? I mean, we all have aspects of ourselves that are not always pleasant. We all have a temperament. It's all in how we vent our frustrations and stuff like that. So, I mean, sure. I mean, you like I say, you literally say that about anybody. But at the end of the day, he was a very loyal human being, which I can say right now is a very rare thing. I mean, he was loyal to those around him. I would even say selfless in some cases. But having to make him the scapegoat, of course, they were going to paint him out to be a monster.
Well, let's talk about they, and let's talk to the aspect of the audience that may be tuning in that may not be so quick to put their arms around this notion of a cuddly Charlie Manson. Let's look at it like this. Let's look at it, the reality of the
Right.
case in terms of that he was a criminal. He admits it. He was a pimp. He was a car thief. He was violent. He was he forged checks, and he shot lots of pop. He shot Bernard Crowe. And he's also been implicated in the killing of Shorty Shea. He may have participated in that. He may not have killed him, but there's been some theories that he slashed Shorty Shea while Steve Grogan and Tex Watson did him in. So let's give the audience that is not so quick to have an affection for the Manson phenomenon, and so let's give them that, and that's correct. But
Yes.
here's the other side of it too, in conjunction with that. Let's look at some people like I don't know. There was a gentleman named there was a man called Charlie Barron. He was called the Gentleman, or actually the General. Charlie Barron, the General. He was an organized crime figure. He was a hitman, and he was tied in with mafia figures. A guy named Frankie Carbo, and also Frank Costello, who was. These were the top head figure mafia crime figures back in the 60s. And after the murders, the Cielo Drive murders, and Jay Sebring had been killed, this gentleman who was friendly with Jay Sebring called Sebring International, the hair salon business enterprise, and he a guy named I think Joe Tornaba, who was a hairstylist there, picked up the phone, and Charlie Barron told him, "Listen, it's cool, man. Nothing's going to happen to you. You have nothing to worry about. You didn't do anything wrong." And he hung up the phone. So this adds a variable to the case in terms of the organized crime, drug trafficking element that was buried by the prosecution to protect their clients. So as Charlie may have been in line with the idea of being a hippie cult leader, mind controlled devil, or someone who would shoot people, a convict, a womanizer, a pimp, etc., the people that are involved in what I believe was the cover up were by far worse than what Charlie was. They were murderers.
Yeah.
They were killers, and then they also worked in a conspiracy of agreement to thwart justice, so that they could basically protect powerful, influential people that were criminals. So, in that sense, if you believe in any of the interviews that were given, if you anybody who does take some time to do research on these people that I mentioned, Sebring, the last remaining person that was connected to Jay Sebring, came forward and gave a statement not that long ago that basically, substantiates this phone call that came from this man I was telling you about, Charlie Barron. And so, when you start putting some of these pieces together that involve organized crime, you wonder, well, what was really going on at Cielo Drive? What did Charlie have to do with it? What have we been sold by the people who stand to lose or gain? And who was the scapegoat, as you mentioned earlier? And the scapegoat, in my opinion, is clearly Charles Manson. Doesn't mean Charlie Manson was a good guy or the devil. It
No.
simply means that he is not what people have been trained to believe over the years, because they've been kind of spoon-fed a narrative that its baseline comes from Vincent Bugliosi's book, Helter Skelter, and another book, The Killing of Sharon Tate, which both books were procured by ghostwriters, a guy named Jerry Cohen, and I forget the other guy, who worked with the prosecution to write the book, and also with Lawrence Schiller, who was the photojournalist who basically violated the gag order by Charles Older, the judge who presided over the Manson case, not to communicate any publicity about the trial or any kind of interviews with the suspects. But they ignored that. And basically, Lawrence Schiller, along with defense attorney Frankie Carbo, not Frankie Carbo, I mean Paul Caruso, who was Susan Atkins, a defense attorney. Lawrence Schiller and Paul Caruso basically sold the story to the European press and got Susan Atkins basically to give a confession that was basically, concocted by Vincent Bugliosi to lay blame to Manson as being the culprit and invent this theory of Helter Skelter, which redirected attention away from the drug trafficking that was happening at Cielo Drive. So I think it's curious, when you look at the case, to consider that. And Frankie, what is the other guy's name? Richard Caballero, who is also Susan Atkins' defense attorney. I find it curious that the defense and the prosecution both stood to gain by releasing an interview or a confession by Susan Atkins, painting Manson as the Svengali and the cult leader that manipulated them to kill, when basically what people don't realize is that Susan Atkins, before they overthrew the death penalty, was looking at the gas chamber, and also not Caballero, because he was a public defender. He couldn't receive remuneration for the story that they sold to the European press, but Paul Caruso and Lawrence Schiller, who procured the confession by Atkins, were given $175,000, and they split that money. I think Susan Atkins got 40%, Paul Caruso got 30%, and Lawrence Schiller got the rest. So there was financial gain for that confession to be, kind of orchestrated or, manufactured. And there was also, Caballero's insistence to Susan Atkins that he was going to do everything he could, along with Paul Caruso, to keep her out of harm's way, and so she wouldn't be facing the death penalty, and put it all on Manson. So the agenda was to basically, railroad Manson, and also they defied the gag order, which is illegal, and there were no repercussions. So when you look at it from that point of view, it almost as if like Vincent Bugliosi and Evel Younger, which is the DA at the time, who was basically paying puppet masters to that whole trial. It's almost as if there was no defense attorney. There was no defense at all. There was just the prosecution on both sides. The defense team play acted that role, but they really were they worked in collusion with the prosecution to move Susan Atkins, which was the whole premise of their case, even Vincent Bugliosi admitted that their case without Susan Atkins was very thin in terms of getting conviction on Manson. They needed somebody to come forward and tell a story that could convict him. And without that, they had nothing. And so when Susan Atkins recanted her testimony and refused to basically offer up a second confession, they kicked her out of the box, and they, Vincent Bugliosi put Linda Kasabian in there and realized he needed to utilize her confession to gain the conviction. So there was a lot of manipulation around the trial, in my opinion, that suggests that the violation of the gag order, financial remuneration, organized crime figures, meaning Paul Caruso defended a lot of mob guys. And Bugliosi was friendly with people too that worked in similar circles. Robert Evans at Paramount received money from organized crime to basically help to launder that money to help keep the studio from falling into ruin. Another mob attorney, and they called him the Fixer, Sidney Korshak, was another guy who worked with Robert Evans to basically get Roman Polanski off of the rape charges, and also to bury the drug trafficking element, because why expose your client if the organized crime is making you a lot of money at the studio, and drug and Los Angeles has been, it goes into a state of prohibition with drugs, and organized crime takes over, then there's an agenda there that has to be protected. There's an agenda moving through, and a lot of money being made, and if that's exposed, then it can cause a lot of problems in people's lives, and people are going to get killed. So my point, which takes me back to this gentleman, this very nefarious, mysterious guy named Charlie Barron, who called Sebring Enterprise to let this hairstylist guy know, this guy Joe, listen, there's nothing for you to worry about. You didn't do anything. And this guy was friendly with Jay Sebring. So there's the theory that the killings at Cielo Drive, though Tex Watson supposedly was the murderer, and Linda Kasabian coaxed him into it because they wanted to get Bobby Beausoleil out of jail, right? And they needed money to do that. So they, when Wojtek Frykowski was trying to run corner the market in MDMA, and so when Tex Watson and Linda Kasabian had bought some of that from him, and they didn't get their drugs, Linda Kasabian said, well, we can do, I know some rich, fat cats up in Beverly Hills that owe us either drugs or money. Let's go up there and get our money or get our drugs. And so they went up there, and that's, to me, what makes more sense, not the helter-skelter theory that Manson was pissed off because Terry Milcher burnt up the record contract. And so then Manson was pissed and wanted to go after Terry Milcher. And so he sent his minions to go kill. Manson knew that Terry Milcher had left Cielo Drive to move to Malibu. So it doesn't make any sense. And also, why would Manson send other people to go kill a bunch of people when he was not afraid to go face Bernard Crowe, Lots of Papa, and shoot the guy? And the reason Manson went to do that was because, once again, Tex Watson, who was basically a drug dealer and was notorious for burning other drug dealers in Hollywood, he stole a bunch of money, a couple $1,000 from Lots of Papa, Bernard Crowe, and he was going to buy some marijuana. And then he ran to the ranch, and he told Charlie basically that he was worried that this guy was going to come after them. And then Lots of Papa called the ranch and said, listen, man, if I don't get my money back, I'm going to come down to the ranch, burn it to the ground. I'm going to kill all you hippies. So I find it curious that this person they think is a coward, Charlie Manson, he didn't do anything, but he got other people to do it. Well, what's ironic to me is that the leader of the Straight Satan Biker Club, the P president, Danny DiCarlo, was at the ranch. And Manson asked him and a couple other people to come with him to deal with Tex Watson's issue, his problem with this drug dealer in Hollywood. Nobody would come with him, man. So Charlie went there with some guy, some dude who decided to come help him out. Former Green Beret. I wasn't. He was just actually he was in Vietnam. He was a former combat vet. He was a combat vet, and so he went with him. And so Manson faces this guy, tries to bargain with him so he won't come to the ranch, kill Tex Watson, hurt the girls, because Charlie thought that maybe this guy, because this guy was a very on the totem pole of drug dealing, he was way up there. He wasn't some low level drug dealer. He was well known. He was like the Superfly of drug dealing in Hollywood. And so I think Manson was concerned that he might be connected to the Black Panthers, and that could bring down quite the shitstorm to the ranch. And I think he went up there to preserve the sanctity and the equanimity of the ranch and to protect people when no one else would come with him. So he went there. He tried to bargain with lots of Papa, and what people also don't realize that Tex Watson had left his girlfriend with this guy. And the guy said, I'm going to kill this girl too if I don't get my money. So Charlie went up there not only to try to free this girl from this drug dealer, work it out, and in a peaceful way. And then when he realized that the guy wouldn't concede to that, Charlie grabbed a gun off the table and shot the guy, man. So here's a guy who's accused of being a coward and sent his minions to go kill somebody, a bunch of people at Cielo Drive because of
right. He's not afraid to get his hands dirty.
None of it makes any sense, man. It's a convoluted mess. What makes sense to me is organized crime with dealing drugs through Hollywood, Beverly Hills, and places like Palisades, all over. And when they found out that other people were moving into that business, when the Canadians, were coming down, the Canadians were moving MDA from down there, and then people like Jay Sebring, or not even so much him, because he was friends with Frank Sinatra and knew some of those organized crime guys, so they gave him a pass, but who knows? But when Wojtek Wachowski and Tex Watson started to move independently, their own enterprise of drug dealing, it's very possible that they met up with some maybe organized crime figures at Cielo Drive that night, and maybe Tex Watson did kill Sharon Tate. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he did, or maybe there were other people there that said, "Listen, here's the deal. This is how this is going to go." So it's theoretical. But one thing I feel very certain of is that some people that I know who are very adamant about a different narrative, they don't believe in that. They believe in the love for brother theme, or they believe in the MK Ultra nonsense. To me, there may be some love for brother there. I know the girls like Leslie Van Houten and Susan Atkins says she wanted to, but I think because Leslie Van Houten had the relationship with Bobby Beausoleil, I think, ideally, or in theory, maybe one or two of the women did want to free Bobby from jail, and get some money to hire a lawyer. And that was some of the motivation to go up to the house and get the money back from Jay Sebring and Wojtek Wachowski, because they've been, they got burned on the drug deal. So they get us our money back so we can hire a lawyer and get Bobby out of jail, so that makes sense to me. The drug angle makes sense to me. But Manson saying, listen, go out there and kill these people because I'm angry at Terry Milcher, doesn't make any kind of sense to me, man. It just doesn't add up.
It really doesn't.
Yeah, just a bunch of hogwash. And when you consider the players that are involved, when you consider the defense attorney that violated the gag order, when you consider that money was made for Susan Atkins' confession and that she rescinded that confession. And when they asked her again, she would not testify against Mann. She decided, no, I'm not going to. And they're like, really? And then they moved her out of there. And Vincent Bugliosi, along with the defense attorney, put Linda Kasabian in there, man, as their starlet, kind of this idea of Pollyanna, who was just a victim of circumstance, when in fact, people don't realize prior to her being at the Spawn Ranch, Linda Kasabian had a history of drug dealing. before and after she was given an immunity. If you look at if you look at the police reports over the years, she was busted after the Manson case for drug dealing. Her children were. She moved up to Washington State and continued basically a career in drug dealing and was arrested on multiple occasions for that. So this idea of Linda Kasabian, Susan Atkins, any of these women being the innocents under the spell of the Malocchio curse of the evil wishmaster doesn't make any sense to me when all these women have their own personal agendas that deal either with drugs, manipulation, for any number of reasons. Tex Watson was messing around with belladonna. Susan Atkins was trying to deal speed independently. And Charlie told them all, listen, man, no speed on the ranch. If you want to smoke some weed, fine. You want to do some LSD, great. But no speed, no methamphetamine on the ranch. He made it very clear about that, but they just didn't listen to him. They went off on their own and did their own thing. Everyone thinks that Charlie was holding court and, under the spell of MK Ultra or his supernatural powers, turned them all into zombies, and they just followed them like the Pied Piper into hell. Just is, to me, just enough. It's the stuff of horror movies, man. It's entertaining, I guess, and makes for good true crime novels like Helter Skelter and any number of ridiculous books.
But then again, there's that money element.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, what was that? Helter Skelter was the most successful true crime thriller book that ever been. It sold more copies than any true crime story in history, man, in American history. So, I mean, if you consider the financial gain for something like that, and all the other players that are involved, to me, it's kind of a no-brainer, man. In that regard, that there was it was in a sense a conspiracy to cover up the drug element that was basically procured by organized crime, and organized crime was connected to the studio system for obvious reasons. I suggested earlier that they were laundering money through the studio to save Paramount. And a lot of powerful people like Sidney Korshak, the Fixer, and other people, it made sense for them to protect common interests with people they were in business with, man. And when Roman Polanski is in trouble, what did he do? He talked to Sidney Korshak. He talked to Robert Evans. They were friends, man. So they made the rape charges go away. They made a lot of things disappear and redirect attention and lay it on this poor hillbilly who was a criminal, was, I guess, by conventional standards, a bad guy, but not a serial killer, not in line to create a conspiracy to kill a bunch of people. I don't believe in any of that part of it. That to me is a bunch of hogwash.
I don't believe it was malicious. And when it comes to the mob, I've studied a lot of that over the years, and especially in the 60s, obviously the 50s too, but man, they had everybody in their pocket. Everybody was getting paid to make sure that they didn't get tied to nothing. So to me, that makes the most sense because number one, either one of those fucking lawyers are not going to want to have to sleep with one eye open or not sleep at all, because they did the right thing. So no, what are they going to do? They're going to take a bribe. They're going to do the wrong thing, just to keep them completely out of the picture. And, poor Charlie, man. Sure.
Well, that's the thing. I ran into a guy, when I recently made those videos for you in Chatsworth, I ran into a guy who was on the trail there. I'm glad you like him. And I ran into this guy who, I guess he was doing some documentary. He had his camera equipment. He was walking around and we talked a little bit. And he was going on and on about how he felt sorry for the women. I said, really? You feel sorry for the women? He goes, yeah, I feel sorry for the girls and how Charlie manipulated them. I said, really? Did you read Lynette Fromm's book, Reflections? He goes, yeah, I read it. how'd you feel about that? Because she speaks very highly of Charlie, and she still has a heart for him to this day. Won't speak a bad word about him. Neither will Sandra Good. Well, yeah, but I think they're, I think she's a little bit, he was trying to indicate that she might be a little bit nuts or something. And I thought, well,
Right.
I don't know. I read her book. She seemed pretty coherent to me, man. She doesn't seem crazy to me. She seemed to me to be a very soulful intellect that wrote a detailed account of her experiences with Charlie from more of an intimate point of view, not
Sure.
another. She wasn't embellishing any kind of like, you know, you know, uh, opportunity to sell more horror stories about the killing. She didn't even hardly talk about that. She talks about her experiences with Charlie and getting to know him and all that. So I thought it's
Mm.
curious that after all these years she would write something like that, and that this man is still considering that she's has some kind of issue psychologically, and the ones that do still are loyal to him, clearly they have a mental problem because of that. And I'm thinking, well, that's an opinion. Okay,
That's societal.
that's an
That's what
opinion.
that is. That is completely societal.
Yeah, I guess it all depends on who you talk to, man. I mean,
For
everybody,
sure.
they got all these new shows coming out now that are also want to, they want basically cash in on the Manson phenomenon. And if they can spin it, manipulate it in such a way that, or sensationalize it and add new elements to it, like Tom O'Neill's book, Chaos, and throw the CIA in there. Well, the CIA was the real culprit behind this, puppet mastering everybody. And they used Charlie Manson as a guinea pig and gave him MK Ultra. And that's how, it makes for intriguing, I guess, fantasy, like a good fantasist would suggest. But I don't know how anybody who does any research on Charlie Manson and how his temperament was and his personality, he's the last guy, I dare say, would follow anybody or be a snitch when he never snitched,
Mm-mm.
and would not be one to work with the CIA if he's a rebel and a criminal and an outlaw and defies every aspect of conventional structures to the point where everybody's when they hear the name. Why would he be so willing to work in cahoots with an agency like the CIA? That doesn't make any sense to me either, man. It just sounds like a
No.
far reach from somebody who just wants to sell a book and add a new element and go, wow, check this out. They heard of the MK Ultra, yeah, and everybody goes, oh yeah, wow, the CIA, and they manipulated Charlie with drugs, and it's just like
It's a great script, doesn't it?
yeah, it's once again, it would work great, I guess, in maybe in a horror movie or a thriller or something, I guess. But anybody who spends time
Sure.
researching Charlie Manson and all his faces and masks that he wore, and then when he finally took the mask off, and you get a sense of him spiritually, like I said, he to me is not he's not CIA material, man.
No. No,
You
they're
can
the
tell
coldest motherfuckers on the planet.
yeah. I mean, he lived on the tier all those years with no snitch on his back because he knew if he said anything about what he knew in terms of the organized crime variable, whether Lino LaBianca owing money to the mob and the Little Black Book and the killings at Waverly, etc., they would have killed him. So he kept his mouth shut, even
Oh,
though he knew a
instantly.
lot. He knew a lot of stuff, but he said things in code in ways that unless you really dig deep and understand all the players involved and do a case study of the last 5-6 decades, you won't even understand what he was talking about. You just think he's a lunatic. Well, he speaks in these parables like he thinks he's Jesus, and he does weird things, and that was just the game he would play because he knew
He
the
ain't no
media was
Messiah.
like going to say, "We're the good guys, Charlie. We're going to provoke you now. Do your 10 greatest hits of being evil." And
You're
he would
right.
accommodate them. He put on a show for them. But that was mainstream media. If you go behind the curtain and you look at some of the other interviews where he's not doing that, you get a sense of a very cognizant, insightful, introspective genius of a man, quick-witted, smart, understands history, understands all sorts of things, man. It's like, that's not, but most people, they don't take the time to do the research. They just they want a
I don't want
boogeyman to
to.
believe in. It's easier for them
That's right.
to find a boogeyman to believe in. And I know what that's like, being in the show of industry and having people put me in a box of perception because, the tattoos, and when I got them, they weren't cool. So I know what it's like to be represented to the public a certain
Right.
way, and people think that that's who you are. And I think clearly a much more extreme version of that is the Charlie Manson phenomenon, is that they made him into this monster based on a perception that geniusly was orchestrated and concocted by the prosecution and the defense worked together for those reasons, because they had
Yeah.
very powerful friends that they had to protect, which was the mafia.
Yeah.
And ironically, when Charlie was in prison, he was friends with Frank Costello, who was the capo of the time of the mafia. He looked up to guys like when Bugsy Siegel got taken out by Paul Caruso. Killed Frankie Carbo was the one that killed Bugsy Siegel, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think he admired those. He kind of looked up to organized crime guys, man. He was in prison with a lot of them. Alvin Creepy Karpis, who was a guitar player, the guy, the former member of the Mob Barker gang, who was associated with the Bonnie and Clyde robberies. He was part of that club. He was a part of that circle of outlaws. So Manson ran into a lot of men who were very powerful or part of, syndicates of crime, Murder Incorporated and other enterprises of criminality, where he looked up to and admired, man. So I mean, to me, I find it curious that the same people that probably helped orchestrate the cover up are the people that he remained loyal to all that time. Says a lot about him.
Yeah, I think he understood omerta better than anybody in that respect, because you spend that much time around, the Italians, you pick up on everything because they were code speakers too. They had different words for different things. Shit, the American Gangster, Frank Lucas, same thing. He spent a lot of time around the Italians and knew how to run his drug business. So, and I think that's one thing that, it's been shown in a couple of films that come to mind, especially like The Godfather, that, they were contributing to the film industry. And I honestly, to this day, believe the same thing. After The Sopranos went off, there was like a slew of independent mob films. Some of them were actually pretty damn good, but you know where they got the financing for that. They weren't doing the Indiegogo. It was somebody's uncle. It was somebody's, papa. So, yeah, I definitely can agree with this. I definitely agree with this, that they were at the heart of it, man. And I don't think it was because that Charlie was malicious. Was he violent? Sure. But it was more like malice with purpose. If I want to say that. He didn't do anything he didn't have to do. He did it because he had to, I think, in some of these cases. Now, does that, make him any less of a criminal? Fuck no. Of course not.
Do you think he suffered from some misguided loyalty? I mean, look at this. Tex Watson was, I think Charlie mentioned a couple of times that the only reason he wanted to deal with the guy was because he had a truck he wanted. So they did a trade or something with a truck that Tex Watson had, but that he regretted the day he ever met him, because, the guy kept just stepping in shit, Tex Watson, and he was burning drug dealers left and right. And, people don't realize this. People think Tex Watson was a part of the commune. He very rarely stayed there, man. He wasn't really hanging out at Spawn Ranch that much. He just hid out occasionally when he screw up and somebody was after him, like when Lots of Pop was looking to kill him because of the drug burn. So people don't understand that Tex is that Manson's misguided loyalty to help Tex, or maybe not even so much to help Tex, but I think to save the ranch, because there was a sanctity in the agreement of people that were there, the women, the men he was friendly with. He did, I think, in that sense, Charlie was Uncle Charlie, in that he cared about preserving that place and not having it, be burnt to the ground, or any number of things happening there that would be the ruin of it. So I think he still had, yeah, he definitely was loyal to a fault. He helped Tex. He even went over to Gary Hinman's, man, when Bobby needed the money to pay back the Straight Satans, because Gary Hinman was an amateur drug, basically drug maker. He made mescaline, right? Mescaline. And he sold it to, or gave it to Bobby Bussley to sell to the Straight Satans, the biker club that was hanging out at the Spawn Ranch. And they got sick from it, so they said, right? And they wanted their money back. So Bobby had to go over to Gary Hinman and say, listen, man, I got some angry bikers. You got to give us the money back, or it's going to be my ass. And Gary Hinman wouldn't have it, and they got into it. And then Manson shows up. They kind of say, look, man, do the right thing. And then he sliced his ear. You hear me? As a message, and he left. And then I guess one of the theories is that once Charlie left, that Gary Hinman threatened that he would go to the authorities and snitch Manson out and would violate his parole and get him thrown back in prison. So when Bobby heard that, it could have been that Bobby wanted to impress the Straight Satans, also impress Charlie. So between him, Mary Brunner, I think Susan Atkins was there, they fucking killed him, man. They stabbed him or smothered him, any number of things, for a couple of days until they basically took him out, So here's another instance where Charlie and the scenario of Bobby Busseley and this Gary Hinman guy potentially putting Charlie back in jail, and I don't think Charlie said kill Gary Hinman. He just went there because Bobby, the research I've done is that Bobby called Manson and said, hey man, what do we do? And then he said, let me come over there and talk to him. We'll straighten this shit out. I don't think it was in Manson's plan to be a party to another homicide that would get him thrown right back in jail, any more than it was to have to shoot Bernard Crowe because Tex Watson ripped off this drug dealer. See, all these people around Charlie were doing things, Susan Atkins too, that involved criminality, Linda Kasabian as well. And so Manson is the one that gets at the end gets holding the hot potato, so to speak. When everybody else was doing things independent of him without, necessarily his approval, he wouldn't tell you don't do it, but I don't want you to do it, and I wouldn't suggest you do that. And so I don't know. It's just bizarre how they flipped the whole thing with the help of Susan Atkins' bullshit confession that was procured by, Lawrence Schiller, who also was around during the Gary, what was that guy's name who killed a bunch of people? Gary, the guy I'm talking about, the serial killer guy.
Yeah.
Lawrence Schiller had this knack for being like an ambulance chaser. He'd always be around for the cases like the O.J. Simpson thing. He was there for that. He was there for the Gary Gilmore, that killer, that guy. He was around during that time. He was always around to make a buck and to spin things in such a way to make a buck and misdirect information and basically be a part of a lie. And I think he was very clever in what he did with the European press, defying the gag order with Paul Caruso as well to gain the confession, which was, just a pack of lies, but was released to the public, man. Mm-hmm. That confession that Susan Atkins gave was released to the public. America watched that. And so between that, Nixon saying on television what he said before the trial even started, then he rescinded President Nixon rescinded his statement, and he said alleged serial or whatever he said killer, because they realized that was illegal to presume innocent until guilty, right? So right. Nixon, the president,
unconstitutional.
All the stuff was unconstitutional and illegal. but it flew out there. And once that got out into the general public zeitgeist, they already had convicted Manson, or at least perceived him as being this manipulative maniac that, basically the Svengali who manipulated these poor little innocent women, And I'm not saying they were bad women. I'm simply saying I don't know how innocent they were and how gullible or vulnerable they were when Linda Kasabian was a drug dealer before and after Charlie. Susan Atkins hung out at Haight-Ashbury with bikers. She was doing what she was doing. She was a stripper. All of them have these kind of curious pasts,
right?
With the exception of maybe Lynette Fromm, who went to college, and Sandra Good. I mean, not all of them were like that, but the ones that seem to be crucial in the case, and they want to, put a halo of virtue around, actually were the worst of them. And they're the ones saying Charlie's the devil, when in fact, I don't know.
Everybody had their part to play in this. It's like you said, they're not all innocent. I don't believe that anyone that was there against their will.
No, I don't believe that either, man. You and I can definitely agree on that too. That I don't think Manson put a gun to anybody's head and say, you have to stay here. In fact, when Manson wanted to go out to Barker Ranch and get away from the city and leave Spawn Ranch, he met resistance with some of the so-called followers because they didn't want to live out in the desert. They realized how hard it was going to be to live out there, and some of them wanted to come back to the city. They weren't sold on Manson's utopian scheme to get away from the ruin and fall of Los Angeles as he saw it in the 1960s. He wanted to get out of there because he saw what was happening, and he wanted to get free of that. I think that was probably one of his reasons for wanting to go out to the desert to Barker Ranch, but and explore all that. So I don't know. I just feel like you said, I don't know as much. People assign him tremendous influence, control over the circumstance, and I don't feel that was the case at all. I feel he was used to some degree. So. Yeah, maybe not to all the degree, because keep in mind, he was a pimp, he was a criminal, he did steal cars. So I'm not saying that people who might have met him at the ranch might have found him to be the charming, sweet. They might have found him to be a very egomaniacal type, and maybe he was toward them. And 5 different women that met Charlie, you get 5 different answers. And the common narrative now is to throw Charlie on the bus because it's popular.
Mm-hmm.
It's popular and it's convenient to name him devil. My question then is, well, you guys are all pointing your fingers at him. What about you, Bobby Beausoleil? What about you, Bruce Davis? What about you, Steve Grogan? What about all you guys, man, that did something? Did Charlie whisper something in your ear and you went to sleep, and then all of a sudden you start? That's just horse shit, man. That's just it's too convenient, man. It doesn't make any kind of sense in the ministry of logic, unless, of course, you believe that Charles Manson had supernatural powers and was, had this ability to do that to people, or through MK Ultra also, was able to put stuff in their LSD or make them all brainless, killing zombies at his command, man. It just sounds like the stuff of a really bad horror movie, man.
That's how they painted it
like
out.
Reality. What's up?
That's exactly how they painted it out to be.
Yeah.
Like they were just these mindless, nothings, because, nothing obviously against women, but, in a court case, they were coerced and,
Yeah, they were coerced by the prosecution and the defense attorney. They were coerced because you got to remember something. Between 1969 and 1972, the death penalty was still humming. They overturned that for a few minutes, for about 6 or 7 months, 8 months. But then as soon as they overturned it, within 9 months later, it was back again. So Susan Atkins, all of them were facing the death penalty, the gas chamber, man. So that's, I think, enough motivation times mafia influence and crooked attorneys and some money to get people to say anything, man, because they're looking at their death, and
right.
and they're young. So I think with a little bit of influence by the prosecution and the defense attorneys, and some money, because Susan Atkins apparently got a percentage of that 150 or
Oh,
175,000
fuck
that they
yeah.
made selling the story to the European press on the confession. So I mean, there was motive there to lie. There was motive to save one's own skin and throw Manson under the bus because they were
Yes,
looking to face death. So that's
of
what people
course.
keep forgetting. They were facing the death penalty, man.
They were going to get turned into sausage.
Yeah. And Tex Watson was conveniently hanging out in Texas and wasn't even brought into the court until later on, when Vincent Bugliosi had secured his whole Helter Skelter story. When he finally put the pieces of that fairy tale together to sell to the jury, then he, introduced Watson into the scheme in late time, as not to have as much influence, because he didn't know which way he was going to go, because Tex Watson had his own attorney. I mean, Linda Kasabian had Gary Fleischman. Tex Watson had his attorney. Manson had this inept lawyer named Irving Kanarak. He was useless. So, I mean, they might as well, some of them served well to have the attorneys they had, but even Susan Atkins, she recanted her confession. She would not testify against Manson. She changed her mind. Why? Because she probably realized that she got hoodwinked by the process. She knew that they were playing games. And the funny thing people also don't know, another little fun fact, is that in that movie that Tarantino made called Once Upon a Lie in Hollywood, I would like to retitle it because it's all a bunch of lies. But that moment where
that was bullshit. That
well,
whole
I find it
thing.
curious though
Fuck Brad Pitt.
well, don't you find it curious, Reaper,
I
that in that film
do.
there's a scene at the Playboy Mansion, right, where the mamas and papas, Mama Cass is running, holding hands with the Sharon Tate character, and they're running in there, and then there's Steve McQueen is standing there. Here's some information that some of the audience might find curious, and you can look this up if you don't believe me. Hugh Hefner allowed Vincent Bugliosi the opportunity to stay at the Playboy Mansion, write his book Helter Skelter. He gave him a room there. Okay. Steve McQueen was very good friends with Roman Polanski, okay, despite how Quentin Tarantino makes them out to be rivals, all right? And when Mama Cass and John C. Phillips went to the Cielo Drive after the killings that night to buy drugs, and they stumbled upon the bodies and freaked out, they contacted their buddies in the Hollywood Circle of Power. One of those people was Steve McQueen, who went to Jay Sebring's house and supervised the removal of those drugs so that before the authorities got there, so there wouldn't be any evidence to further along the reality of the drug reality, man, the drug angle, man, which is what was going on. So Steve McQueen, I think Tarantino knows a little bit because he probably talked to a bunch of people, but he got to be careful with how much truth he puts out in the movies, because the same people that were in cahoots back in the 60s, I dare say some remnants of that are still around now. So it's like, I think, he had to be real careful about how he told that story. But if anybody who knows the case, I think there's a reason why these Easter eggs are in the movie, that Mama Cass was friendly with Charlie Manson. John C. Phillips, if you look it up in an interview, Roman Polanski, when he was questioned by the police right after the killings, one of the first things he said in his statement that he suspected that John C. Phillips, the singer of the Mamas and Papas, might have been involved in the killing of his wife, because he knew what a tweaker that guy was. And once that band was starting to depreciate in its value, they started dealing drugs like everybody else. And he thought maybe that John C. Phillips may have been involved in it. So there's a lot of curious players in the Hollywood charade of power back in those days that were kind of like covering up for each other and looking out, and lied about stuff that they knew, and would never say, oh, yeah, you think Mama Cass would admit that she knew Charlie Manson? They were friendly and they hung out together. He became radioactive, dude. So everybody ran away and hid in a fantasy of a story to make themselves look clean and assign the dirt to that guy. He's the one, man. And I thought, like I said, He wasn't a good guy, in my opinion. Though I respect Charlie, and I know he came up really hard, and it shaped him a lot. He transcended it by offering at least people like me and maybe you a kind of ideology and a philosophy that sets some of us free, who feel like we've always been on the outside looking in and locked up in a society that doesn't understand where we're coming from, man. And Charlie gave us
That's
that
right.
voice and didn't judge us. And I said, oh, wow, there's somebody else in the world that's been through something way worse than me, but I can go to, and I can feel comforted by knowing that I'm not alone. So, for what it's worth.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very relatable.
But I just need, for those people who are skeptical, I want to be responsible in my observations. That I'm not saying Charlie was Baba Ramdas or
Right.
Gandhi. I know that even Neil, what was his name, the singer from Crosby, Stills, Neil Young said, like, he was friendly with Charlie, and he said that he always perceived Charlie as kind of like, he saw him as like the shadow side or the dark side of the Maharishi. Like he saw as him some kind of like, like shaman, like outlaw shaman, dark shaman, but that he was the flip side of that coin, that he had some genius awareness, but it lived in where people would perceive in Abraxas, the duality of things, that he lived more in what people would consider the negative field, not the positive field, so, but either way, even
And there's
Neil
always that
saw that in him. What's up?
Yeah, there's always that duality. I mean, in every culture you see it. There's always a light and a dark, because without the balance, it's all chaos. So for him to be more like you said, like a dark shaman, they exist. They've existed for years, and we need them.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest.
What else? If he's so bad, then what does that say then? So then our they're not my leaders, they're not your leaders. Whether it was Nixon and his Watergate, Vietnam War, when Abbie Hoffman and Jerry Rubin and Bobby Seale, the Black Standards, would stand up and say, "Rise up, kids," against the establishment. They knew something was wrong. When John F. Kennedy got assassinated, when Martin Luther King was killed, when Bobby Kennedy was killed, when Malcolm X was killed, etc. So what's going on then? Is somebody it's Lee Harvey Oswald. Well, I don't know about that. The point is that's up for grabs too, right? But the point is that if it's easy to say, well, these are the bad people here, okay, but then where are the good guys then, man? In terms of, like, if you want to talk about duality and we need the balance, because otherwise it'll be chaos. What I would say, brother, we're in chaos right now. There is chaos. The world is nothing but chaos.
Unlimited.
Right? But now if I go up into the mountains right now and take a deep breath and go walk up on the trail and run into some animals, a mountain lion or a deer or whatever I run into, and I don't mess with them and they don't mess with me, and I take a deep breath and I hear the wind blowing, I could perceive it like Merlin, a druid, and say, wow, man, this is heaven. This is paradise. This realm is sublime. So it all depends on how you look at it, where you are. And even when you're in the city, if there's an ability to breathe deep and observe the spectacle as just an illusion and find a center in your being that you bring with you from the forest, from the desert, that's always there, as Osho would say, never lose your meditation, always stay centered, right? So then even in the midst of chaos, right? You know what I mean? There's equanimity. It all depends on how you respond to it and how you observe it. It's easier said than done, though, Right. So, but my point is that if we say we got all the bad guys on one side, we got And these represent the people in the world that are do good, the holy Moroccos and all the do-gooders. I get concerned about some of these do-gooders and all the holy
I was going to
Moroccos and
say,
the people that claim to be
yeah,
here to save us. Because if that's the case, then, man, why is the earth dying? Why is there an ecological holocaust happening? Why is, 30 years ago, Baba Ramdas said, or maybe more, he said that more than 50% of our drinking water is contaminated. That was years ago, decades ago. He said then that in 30 years from now or so, there's going to be 10 billion people on the planet. Not a good prospect. And he said that they believe that technology and money will save the day. He goes, that's not right. That's not true. That's not correct. It's a fallacy. So then, if we got all the bad guys locked up, and we have a sense of right reason, and the Ministry of
yes,
Logic is always operating, then my question then is, why are the oceans dying? Why are the Amazon forests being cut down? Why are our cities in ruin? Why is the violence and the racial issues not gotten any better? They've gotten worse. So where's the devil in all that? Is that Charlie Manson's fault? Who's responsible for this? And it's a rhetorical
gee,
question, obviously. I don't know the answer, but I'm just saying, like, is it us? Are we the ones responsible in the way we interact with our brothers and sisters every day? Are we being kind? Are we being caring? Are we being fair at work? Or are we just
it's
following
the
the line? Well,
kindness.
it's not me, man. It's my boss. Well, who's your boss? Let me talk to him. But he works for another company that's owned by another company in Bolivia. And so it just becomes a convoluted mix of corporations that basically have, I guess, squeezed humanity to such a degree that humanity says, you know what? What can I do? What can we do?
Right, exactly.
And maybe we can do something. That's why Greenpeace, ATWA, organizations that are keeping a careful eye on things like the gray wolf, the black wolf, the natural well springs, all these independent charitable entities are trying their best to wake people up and go, hey man, look, we gotta fix this. We gotta save this. We don't need to send rockets into outer space, man. We need to spend all the money and resource to fix what's going on here right now, But
It
you
just
can tell that
that
to
just
people,
seems
but
to
the question
always
is,
be
anybody gonna
the.
do anything about it? What?
Oh, I was gonna say, that just seems to always be the way of thinking with a lot of these big-headed people in power. Oh, well, if it's fucked up, let's find another place. And that's why they're spending millions and millions and millions of tax dollars to try to find another fucking planet that no one has fucked up yet. And it's like I've been saying it for years. People always thought I was fucking crazy for saying this too. It's like I wish we would go back to, like, I don't know, before medieval times, where it was like feast or famine. You had to coexist with the earth because the earth is of you as you are of it. And everybody understood that back in those days. Of course, life expectancy sucked because there was always somebody that would come around and fucking take you out unless you could fight your way through. But, try to put some of these people into survivalist situations. They'll sink. They won't swim.
I agree. I like what you said though about mankind living in harmony with the earth rather
Mm-hmm.
than trying to conquer or beat it into submission. That came over from some other place, I guess, maybe a couple hundred years ago. This idea of manifest destiny, maybe, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. Technics may be the culprit. Any number of variables could be the why. But who knows? I mean, maybe it's the nature of things that the Hindus call this Kali Yuga. We're entering the age of we've entered the age of the Kali Yuga, the degenerative aspect of the species in the realm, and that the species eventually will go extinct, and maybe the earth will survive,
Mhm.
maybe it won't, maybe it'll just blow apart, who knows. But while we're doing that, though, we still have a responsibility to be aware and to still
Yep.
do what's, I guess, in our heart proper, regardless of how bleak things look. There's still opportunities to see the beauty in the most unlikely of places. That's why I think, for me, American Trash was so important, to tell a story that, despite, you know, ecological issues in the cities, and the city Los Angeles falling into ruin, and the loss of life, or PTSD, that ultimately the tagline of the movie is "Love is the cure," right? And whether it
Yep.
was 1,000 years ago or now, I still think that families and loved ones and children and moms and dads, or whatever you want to call it, the family unit and the tribe was very important as a community, to look out for one another. When we lost the sense of community and went into the cyber holes and disconnected from one another, I think we committed a grave error. And
Yes.
we're continuing to commit that grave error every day, by desensitizing ourselves to what our responsibility is in our communities. When I go into big stores like Costco and everything, I try to be
Mhm.
um, courteous and talk to people and say hello to the people working there. And I'm met with this kind of frozen, apathetic response. It makes me sad, because I realize that a lot of people are living in fear. I mean, it all depends on where you go.
Yep.
Some communities are like, hey, you go, hey, what's up, man? What's happening? Hey, what's happening? It all depends on where you are. But in some places, they're not so
It does.
quick to receive you if you look a certain way, and they don't, can't, or they're just, who knows what's going on. But I just wish that, I guess my fantasy is that people would just, realize that every time they run into somebody that they don't know, there's an opportunity to make that person's day better by simply smiling at them or saying hello and reciprocating,
Yep.
man. It's easy, dude. It's not that hard, but so much fear now through media, news, and the push toward violent preoccupation in films and music or whatever, or desensitizing human beings, has overcome the better angels of our nature, that we all wonder why horrible things are happening. Well, we're kind of participating, not me, but there's a lot of people participating in that
It
frequency to
is.
make things very dark and bleak and violent and subhuman, to the point where the culture is falling into subhuman spectacle. And then
Oh yeah.
people go, oh my
Oh,
God, I
boy,
can't
years
believe
of
this is happening. What do you mean?
it.
I see it happening all the time, in terms of how cold humans can be toward one another, man, how petty they can be. And there's no
Yeah.
reason for that. I mean, maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I guess it's an argument or a debate that you can have, but I don't think it doesn't have to be as bad as people make it. And I think, to bring it back to our original topic here, I think that's maybe what Charlie and a few of the people at the spawn, at the genesis of it, before it became all thwarted and weird. I
Right.
think that was what they were hoping for too, to kind of live amongst. If you look at the caves in
Yep.
Chatsworth, they call
Yep.
them the baby caves. Past the go down past the cave and the spring, there are these waterfalls and an area where they used to take baths. It's in the Manson documentary that Robert Hendrickson made. There's these, and we just had the rainy season not that long ago. They're all filled up with water, and the water's clean, man. You can jump in them and just wash yourself. I think they saw an oasis in the midst of the city
Yeah.
before,
Yeah.
Chatsworth changed, and back in the 60s, um, it was just beautiful, and they saw what was possible, and they didn't need a lot of money. They just needed an agreement to, with George Spawn to, clean up the stables and do all that stuff and do the work, and they could live there, man. And I think there might have been moments in time, and I've been to the ranch, long after all the structures are gone. I imagine what it might have been like, but some things haven't changed. The waterfall's still there. The baby caves
Yeah.
are still there. All that stuff is there. You just got to know how to find it, but it's there. The trails are all there, of where they used to walk and sing and hide out and all that, and climb trees and stuff. So I see the innocence That's why in the movie, people will say, "Why do you say it's a sacred place? That's a terrible place." I go, "Well, to me, it isn't because
Terrible. Nothing
life
terrible
lived there."
happened there.
Say again?
Yeah. I said
What's
nothing
that?
terrible happened there.
Well, some of my critics, some of the critics who didn't understand the film, felt like they drew a comparison between Charles Manson and Adolf Hitler. And last time I looked, Charles Manson didn't, put 6 million Jews
Nope.
in the oven. He
Nope.
may have had that swastika on his head, and that's his own doing. That's his business. But I'm not speaking to that. I'm speaking to that. I think there's a vast difference between a dictator who wants to take over the damn world and kills
Right.
millions of people and started a war that we had to intercede on behalf of the French and all the other, and Great Britain that was getting its ass kicked by the Nazis. That's a whole different. I don't to draw those two comparisons doesn't make any kind of
I don't
sense to
know.
me at all.
They just took the symbol, but if they did their fucking homework, that symbol has meant or stood for very, very different things since
Well,
the
yeah,
beginning of
mysticism.
time.
Yeah, mysticism. I mean, Charlie said that Hitler took that symbol from mysticism, and he reversed it.
Mhm.
So that symbol's been around back to the Buddhist teachings. It's been around for quite a while. Not something new.
Yes, sir.
It's just Hitler thwarted. He perverted it into something else.
Of
And the
course.
argument can be,
And
well, so did
that's the whole
Charlie.
thing.
Yeah.
It's like somebody who takes the upside down cross and suddenly says it's the devil.
Well, here's the thing. Let me play devil's advocate with the people that took issue with my film. Let's just say that's true. Let's say that, yeah, it's bad form to tattoo a swastika on you. I totally get that. I agree.
Mhm.
But here's
Yes.
the thing. There aren't any swastikas in my movie, and I wanted to focus on the
Nope.
aspect of the man that preached or talked about cutting down the trees. That when he got out of prison, he went up into the mountains and he looked around and he seen all the water being polluted. He seen all the trees getting cut down. He saw this concrete maze that man had made. And he said, "Wait a minute, who's responsible for all this? We're all going to run out of air, man. This whole planet's going to run out of air." So I'd rather focus on the aspect of the man's mind that was sensitive to the environment, despite whatever his beliefs may have been about dictators or the swastika or whatever. That wasn't my affair. My movie wasn't a tribute to anything like that. It was a tribute to other things.
Mm.
The problem is that you throw Charlie into
It
the
was an
mix.
idea.
Well, say again.
It was an idea. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, but a lot of them are living in the book of, helter skelter. A lot of them are taking they don't realize it unconsciously or consciously what they believe. They've been led to believe and manipulated the same way, I guess, the fundamentalists would believe in the dogmatic teachings of whatever God they're pushing. So the media was brilliant, and they learned their lesson from the most brilliant one of all, Vincent Bugliosi, and Evell Younger, who supervised to create the narrative of Helter Skelter. And people, it worked, and it's been, and I got this book right here. I would recommend it to anybody who wants to look at something from a different point of view. It's called Goodbye Helter Skelter, written by George Stimson. And it's George would visit Manson for quite a few years and talked with him and interviewed him. And he wrote his book based on a relationship that he developed with Charlie Manson. So for any of your readers who want to know a little bit more, maybe read Goodbye Helter Skelter. It might shed some new light on a very old and manipulated subject.
Yep. Man, it has been a blast on this first episode. I believe that we are planning on doing more, and there's just so much here, so much truth that is tangible, that how all this stuff ties in, because the fact that we're in this industry. But most people that are in the industry really don't know the history and the fact that Charlie Manson was kind of caught up in it, not totally directly, but because of, like you said, the players that pull the strings.
You mean the pornography?
You
mean the pornography? Yeah. Yeah, he was
all
involved
of
in
it.
that. Yeah, he was involved in that. A lot of people were involved. Roman Polanski was making pornos at his house, which featured
Son of a
Sharon
bitch.
Tate and Peter Sellers and Yul Brynner. I mean, he made a lot of movies with his wife having sex with famous people. That was his thing. He was an eccentric. He was, into voyeurism. So it wasn't uncommon in the '60s but he was rich, so he had access to equipment that was state of the art that a lot of people didn't have.
Of course. Yeah, and talk about the biggest coward of them all, fucking moving halfway around the world so he doesn't get busted. Gotta love
and
that
the thing
shit.
is, too, people also don't realize that Sharon Tate had complained to her husband that she didn't like, Wojtek and his band of drug dealing friends, and that she was concerned about them staying there, and she wanted them out. And even though Abigail Folger, who was basically supplying the drug enterprise, she was in relationship with Wojtek. Sharon had told Roman several times that she wanted them out. And even though Jay Sebring once dated Sharon Tate, I don't think she was comfortable with the situation. And she made that known to him. And the fact that he was aware of that and, still just, left for Europe and left her alone, assuming that everything would be okay when it wasn't okay. And that there had been rumors spread around that something was going to go down because of the heat that was coming, because Wojtek was screwing a lot of people over. And it was just a question of time. When you deal in drug trade, sooner or later, especially when you burn people, someone's going to die. And if your wife is living in a house with those people that are doing that, why would you leave her alone, man? That doesn't make any kind of sense. So as much as Charlie Manson gets a bad rap because he wasn't a good guy, but he wasn't the guy they made him. But let's just say, like, play devil's advocate. So as much as he gets this rap for being a really bad guy and potentially being a part of the conspiracy to have all these people killed at Cielo Drive, where does Roman come in then, in terms of recognizing that his wife had talked to him about this, knowing that they were dealing drugs out of the house, and yet still did not take his pregnant wife with him to Europe just to play it safe in case something did go down? Why didn't he do that? Why did he leave her alone?
Because he didn't give a fuck. He didn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Did he really look like parent material?
Well, I mean, he's not in. He's alive still. Do you know he's still alive, right?
Oh, I know. And he's a coward living over on the other half of the world.
Because if he comes back to the United States, they'll lock him up for statutory rape. But that's that rape. There's another one that Sidney Korshak, the fixer, and Robert Evans helped get him off the charges where he drugged a 13-year-old girl and raped her.
Jeez.
So they were able to get him off those charges. So, I mean, I don't know if Charlie ever raped anybody. He may have, to some, been like I said, maybe this narcissist, egomaniacal type, and someone said he was a very cold, selfish man. He was not a good guy, and I got bad vibes from him. Okay, fine. But last time, I have never heard anyone say, "Yeah, Charlie Manson raped me."
Nope, no one has said that.
No one's come forward and said that, but they said that Roman Polanski they have. So I don't know, man.
Exactly.
It's kind of wild. It just shows me,
devil?
once again, if you've got money and power and you're respected in the public's eye, because you got to remember, back in those days in the 60s, he had directed Chinatown, Rosemary's Baby.
Yep.
He was like Spielberg back in those days. So they were going to do everything they can to protect their little media darling movie star director from anything that would ruin his career, and they'd lose money. They couldn't have that happen, or link anything to expose how
of course not
distorted they were, in the way they lived their lives, all these people. So I think that a lot of Americans back in that time, maybe not so much now, may have been more naive to the belief that, Hollywood, people like Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, all these guys who I listen to their music, were squeaky clean, that there
Me
was
too.
no cocaine going on, that Sammy Davis Jr. wasn't
Oh,
snorting coke, and that, Jay Sebring wasn't selling cocaine to Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra. Oh, that would never happen.
uh-huh.
So when you start exposing these things, what happens
Because
is
they
it
all wore
destroys
fancy
the myth.
suits.
And people don't want their myths destroyed. They want to live in that fantasy. And I
Yup.
totally get it, man. I understand that.
Of course. It's all about appearances because you can't let them know what's beneath. People have always gotten it wrong with me, as kind of an example, because I'm 6'2", I'm 290 pounds. I've been bald since I was 19. And they're always like, like I have this resting bitch face or something, like I'm unapproachable, that I'm intimidating until you hear me speak. So if you give me a chance or you try to talk to me, you might be surprised. And of course, you add a bunch of fucking tattoos into the mix. You know this. Suddenly they think you're this like bad boy fucking, wrong element kind of thing. Uh, so I don't know, man. But
Well, I know it's a very challenging existence, and
it
what makes
is,
it that much more challenging is that our brothers and
especially as a
sisters,
Satanist.
huh?
I said, especially as a Satanist.
Oh yeah. I mean, whether it's Satanist or not, I still think that it's very people are, as much as you want to love them, you
Yep.
try to love them, and you try to give people the benefit of the doubt. You try to give yourself the benefit of the doubt because you're not perfect,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't reproach yourself either. You just
None
want
of
to
us
just
are.
be cool, man, and live and let live,
Exactly.
and maybe hand
Yes.
off some courtesy or some kindness to someone you don't even know. And I think that
I do
sounds
it
easy,
every
but it
day.
seems to be something very difficult in our world, because if that were the case, all the wars would end right now. If
Right.
people would recognize that everyone is going to die, and billions of people have already died, that dying is nothing new. You're going to die. This body's going to die. It's all going to drop. And I think that it's unfortunate that it takes a cataclysmic event, or, oh my God, did you hear what's his name died? It's like, okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear that. It's sad. The person will be missed. But what has always been bizarre, kind of bizarre to me, is that the shock that people experience when that happens, because, and I get it, but I don't, because
Yeah.
I'm always seeing that happen already. It's like, it's not that it's not going to happen. It's going to happen. And so and it's
Yeah.
not to be preoccupied with the being morbid. It's about just recognizing maybe something beyond the physical body that suggests more than
Whoa.
just life from this amount of years to that amount of years, and would move the being into consider something much more expansive and limitless than just the flesh suit. But people are very stuck
Yeah.
in packed consciousness of body mind fixation, and they define their existence based on a name, what they've been taught as a child. They call it somebody training. This is who you are. You live X amount of years and
Mm-hmm.
you die. And so when the you dies, there's a shock. Oh my God, what are we going to do? And there's a sense of destabilizing the positioning. But I'm saying that for those of us who've learned to destabilize prior to the physical death, it's just a ritual, just something that occurs, that's supposed
It
to occur.
is.
It's nothing. But the other side of it is that for those who get very emotional about it and understand what it's like to lose someone they love and miss that person, I get
Mm-hmm.
that part of it. I really do. I'm not
Of
saying I'm insensitive to people's sense of loss. There's no answer to
No,
the issue of loss except
there's no playbook.
realization. But the realization
Mm-hmm.
is, in my opinion, that if we're going to lose everybody, if you're going to lose me and I'm going to lose you, and we're going to lose Uncle Jeff and Aunt Sally, and we're going to lose everybody, more the reason to be sensitive to each other and to consider that if that's the case, and none of us are physically immortal in that sense, then why are we tinkering around with things that are so combustible and explosive that can cause so much pain on the global scale? Why can't we recognize that reality that billions of people have already died, and it's coming. It's not, we're all going to
It's a
face what they call
cycle.
the
It's
intrusion
a
moment.
life cycle.
Right. But that realization, I'm wondering, are people just putting it in the back for later? I'll deal with that when it happens, and when it suddenly thrusts upon me, then I'll come to terms with
There it is.
everything. Yeah.
Y'all.
To me, that's
Why they
dangerous
have.
because, say again?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
To me, that's dangerous because what happens is in that when you are not appreciative of how quickly things
Yes.
can disappear, then you become
Big time.
arrogant and assuming they will always be there, and they won't always be there. They're going to be taken sooner than you expect. More the reason to recognize that
That's
every
right.
moment, every day is a blessing. When someone says to me, "Hey, Robert, how's everything?" I woke up today. And some people go, "Right on, man. I feel you, brother. I get it. Yeah, it's a blessing." Yeah, and other people are like, "Okay, so you woke up today." They don't get it, man, because you're not guaranteed your next
No, they
heartbeat.
sure fucking don't.
You're not
Nope.
guaranteed your next wake up. You're not guaranteed shit, dude,
Nope.
except death. That's your guaranteed, man.
Yes.
More the reason to consider the bigger picture and how you function within all this. Now, I'm not saying because I realize this, I'm walking on water. I'm simply become more sensitive to this prospect. Thus, I don't understand why people get all bent out of shape over some petty shit, man. They get all worked up
I can
and make other
see.
people crazy over some petty shit. When a
I
truck
can
comes
see.
plowing through your house and kills your whole family, then you can talk to me. When half of the city burns to the ground, then you can come
Yep.
talk to me. When a comet comes through the sky and takes out half the continent, talk to me. When there's an earthquake that kills, I don't know, 1 million people, come talk to me. There's so many things that can go wrong that are going to go wrong. Why people
Yes.
tripping over some petty shit, man? And then when
That's
the
the way I
shit
look
does
at
hit
it.
the fan, they'll go, oh my God.
It's so
And now I'm going to
horrible.
start being, dude, fuck, you know what? Okay, good.
That's
Please do
exactly
that.
what.
But
Yeah.
do we need to have the fucking disaster happen before you become sensitive to shit? Come on, man. You know,
That's what I was going
you've
to
had
say.
people.
I could see if somebody was taken, too soon, too young. To me, that's
Yeah,
bad because they hadn't
it's sad,
lived
man.
their
Yeah,
full life. But at the end
yeah,
of the day, and I'm not trying to quote the Mummy, and I'm sure it's going to happen anyway, but damn it, death is the beginning. People aren't really truly understanding that there is another chapter. It's the unknown. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
There's a
dude.
lot of people that just believe that, oh, you become worm food and that's it, you're done. But energy lives on forever. It
Yeah,
does.
I
There
know.
is a
For the
purpose. There
science
is a
mind people,
purpose
you
to
might
this,
want to remind the science mind people of that, because even the physicists
right?
have proven that energy doesn't die; it transmigrates. So it's actually a scientific
Yes.
fact what you said. It's not some theoretical, fundamental hogwash or mysticism, spiritual
Right.
shit. It's a scientific fact.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
How it
there's life
manifests,
to it.
though, in terms of but how it manifests in terms of a personality is up for grabs. If the psyche continues,
Yeah.
the psyche, the personality, all the tendencies, the patterning of the being moves on and finds another vessel, then you're in the Hindu land, the reincarnation, and that
Right.
your patterning reincarnates because you still have to work out your karma. You haven't kind of cleaned your karma yet. You still got lust,
Right.
greed, wrath, sloth, all these things that you're hung up on. And until you finally become a renunciant, let all that go, you won't need to reincarnate and work through shit anymore. You already transcended all those tendencies. And so there's no need for a physical body, man. You're just you're
That
done.
actually, in my opinion, transmutes across cultures, because the idea of leaving one vessel and technically, like, you know, like you say, being reborn in another, uh, is not too far-fetched. There are more than just one culture that actually sees that. You know, it's like every day the earth, bringing it back to topic, gives birth to new life in some form. It could be a plant, it could be a new bug, it could be a new baby for somebody. Life is constantly being turning, recycled, coming back. I don't think that's too far-fetched
Me either.
in a lot of ways, because it's energy, man.
Yeah.
And Charlie fucking knew that, bringing it back to topic again. He knows it. You know, there was another quote that I had pulled up that I thought really kind of made a lot of sense. And I think to all our viewers out there also, you might dig this shit as well. So
Is
let's
there
check
anybody
this
still
one
watching, dude?
Oh, big time. Charlie said, if you look down at me, you will see a fool. If you look up at me, you will see a God. If you look straight at me, you will see yourself. Dude, fucking prolific as fuck. He wasn't an idiot.
Profound. Yeah, that's what
It's
I
like
feel. No, that's why there's no. I don't feel any judgment. I
nope.
feel like, you know, that he gets it, and because he gets it, and he's been down further on down the road than some of us in terms of what he had to endure.
Yes.
He gives us some of us a reference point who've been lost most of our lives, as a way to discover ourselves, independent of this idea of cult influence or a cult leader. He allows you to discover that on your own based on his own experience as a reference point. You know what I mean? What does he say? One of his
Yeah.
Anybody who
It's
don't
wisdom.
know themselves don't know me. And I love that line.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody who doesn't know themselves doesn't know me. So when you start to get in touch with yourself, you can finally hear him, because he speaks to those of us who have been kind of throwaway children, thrown away, and had to learn. What did he say? The best parents are the worst parents, because they teach you to, they leave you to learn. They leave you to learn it on to learn it on your own. In that sense, and I always could relate to that, man. You know, so there's things that he would communicate
like
that
hands-on.
I felt like he was talking about my life, you know, but he's talking about a lot of people's lives that they felt that they were just disposable, throwaway beings. And then he starts talking about something. You're like, wait a minute. Okay, wait, I'm not alone in this. And because his stage of communication was so vast and so controversial and convoluted because of media, you look at it and you stumble across him. You go, who's this dude, man? Well, he's this crazy guy. And you start listening to him going, wait a minute, you think he's crazy? Then you must think I'm crazy, because some of the stuff he's saying makes a lot of sense to me. So you either bond with people because of Charlie, or you lose people because of Charlie. And I don't mind losing those people, because not that I hate him or nothing. We have nothing to talk about.
No.
Anymore. Yeah.
You know, the average person, you know, especially nowadays, it's like whatever can be fed super quick, super fast. They thrive on chaos. I've said it for a long time. The world right now is very much voyeurs. It's like whatever the media can throw out there. Oh, they just want the drama. They want the drama. That's why they watch the court shows. They watch the Jerry Springers and, you know, all that other stuff. It's like, how much fucked up shit can I get in one day to fill my palate? But yet I come back day after day after day. How is that any different than the Roman Colosseum?
Yeah. That's a good point, man. I mean, they would parade around these virgins, or these beautiful women, for a month or so, and then release the lions to have them be eaten alive in front of the crowds, right, for their blood, satisfy their brother. So my question to you is, as you observe 2,000 years ago in the Colosseum of Rome and the blood spectacle, and you observe the fascination with violence and chaos now, Why do you think that
Right.
is, Reaper? What's your theory? Why do you think people feel the need? Why are they hooked on that? Why do they go to it, man?
Natural carnal desires. The
Okay.
darker parts of themselves that they don't want to admit. You know, Anton LaVey, the great magus, always said that man is just another beast. It's
Okay.
in a fleshly suit, and that, I mean, this transcends man and woman, but in his time, that's how he put it. Um, that basically every human has that carnal instinct, like the lion, like the tiger. There are the thrill of the hunt, um, to want more, to make sure that you have all that you can, and not have to feel bad about it. You know, the idea of sin is just a myth. You know, it's a part of our DNA. And that is something I totally, truly believe in. The great indulgence of life. Now, indulgence, as long as it doesn't lead to your untimely death. And I think that's one thing that some people misunderstand about that philosophy. It's just the hierarchy of needs. Look at it. You know what I'm saying? It's not much different. If you don't have those things, you don't have those desires, you're just docile like a shark, just moving through the water.
Yeah, what Ram
If
Dass
it
made that
comes
comment.
along, great.
Well, yeah, he's one of these gurus or motivational speakers is the best way to describe him. He wouldn't like me to call him a guru. He
Mm-hmm.
passed away. Ram Dass, Baba Ram Dass said that. Um, be
Mm.
careful of the renunciates, because when when you renunciate and you turn off those, that what you say was the primordial or the base tendencies, or the appetite, what you have is a horny renunciate. You have those people like
Right.
in the church or in the various religious organizations who have taken a vow to live a certain way and not indulge in gluttony or any of the pursuits of what people would consider ambition, is a sin, or all these things. And yet buried underneath is what's that saying? When you suppress, what is it? If you suppress, when you repress, suppression breeds repression, and suppression breeds compulsion. So if you
Yes.
repress too much and you suppress, you become compulsive. So you got to be careful if you try to push it down, because then it just bubbles up on you. Better to embrace it and burn off that,
Yeah,
work it out, right? Fill the appetite,
exactly.
so to speak.
In a
But then I think
constructive,
that
in a
my question to
constructive
you, though,
way.
is, as a Satanist, so as we
Yes.
feed this appetite, as in our carnal nature, it, as Abraxas communicates about the balance within the two poles,
Mhm.
this duality
Yes.
operating all the time, is there a way to find balance in the carnal desire and the nature, so that we don't flip over and the world just goes into the dark ages again, and people just indiscriminately kill, murder,
Exactly.
take what
Yeah,
they want, and there's no
that's the
semblance
secret.
of integrity on any level. It's just anarchy. So can there be
Oh
balance
no.
in that?
Of course there can be balance. You have to keep everything in check.
Okay.
When it comes to indulgence, like I said before, it's not like, oh, you have a propensity to want to kill people. No, don't go out and do that. That's not very Satanist like whatsoever. you
Okay.
know, it's basically just those natural carnal tendencies to want to achieve more, be more, and that there's nothing that can stop you and be the best fucking human you can be without destroying others. But damn it, if they fucking smite you on the cheek, you better bring a sledgehammer.
I see. Okay, I can appreciate that. Yeah, that communicates.
Mhm.
I get it. Yeah,
Don't take it lying down, you know.
yeah.
You give as good as you get, if
Okay,
that makes sense.
I get it. Yeah, that communicates too. Sure. Well, with respect to the
Man,
show and
this
the
is
forum, I feel like we've gone on for quite a while, and I'm hoping that those who are observing, listening, or observing, will
mhm.
we can relieve them for the moment and come back another time to pick up where we left off. With respect
Of
to your
course.
viewers and you, I don't want to overstay my welcome as your guest, brother. You know,
No such thing, sir.
okay. If there's
I could
something else
talk
you
about
wanted to
this
bring
shit
up,
until the cows come home.
yeah, I feel you, dude, and I feel the same way. But I keep wondering if the people that are observing this feel like it needs to wrap itself up. So, with respect, there's that saying, know your audience. So, clearly, there's people observing this, I'm hoping, and are getting something out of it.
Um,
And maybe what they're getting out of it
they
now is
did.
that you guys need to
Oh, they
conclude.
very, very much did.
Say again?
Yeah, we could definitely save it for the
Yeah.
next edition.
Yeah.
But everyone that was with us from the beginning has not left, and you guys
Okay.
are absolutely fucking amazing, as always. Because the addicts and the demons that show up every single time we go live, you feel it. That synergy, that energy is there, and you're with us. Meredith Brown just said, fucking amazing. See, like I said, no one has left, and this is the type of show that I think is exactly what is needed, and it's actually something I've always wanted to do, because everything kind of ties in all the way between multiple spirituality and exactly what we're talking about in the true crime. There's so many different other avenues that we're going to cover, and we look forward to, as long as Robert has time, whenever he has time and wants to do it, we will definitely be back. This has been an amazeballs first edition, and we appreciate you all out there in the Black Flame universe for joining us tonight. If you've taken away, there's so many different things that you could have taken away from this, not just the informative, but a lot of very relatable things. So no, thank you, Meredith. We totally appreciate you, and everybody out there, Mortimer, Lizzie, all of y'all, Cody, Rebecca, love yous. And I mean that in every sense of the imagination. So until next time, the most thing to remember is stay heavy.
Thank you for joining us on Rebirth Underground. Stay tuned for more from Black Flame Entertainment.